Darling, you have no idea what's possible.
No one dares to ask Cate Blanchett the one question that lingers behind every dazzling performance, every icy gaze, every perfect line delivery. How does someone so brilliant, so revered, remain such a mystery in a world obsessed with revelation? Is it sheer control? Or is there something hidden, deliberately buried beneath the layers of her craft, her elegance, her power? She has played queens, monsters, rock legends, and even Bob Dylan. She's won 2 Oscars, reigned over red carpets, and dominated stages from Sydney to Broadway. Yet, no scandal ever clings to her. No public outburst, no messy divorce, no tell-all memoir, nothing. Just flawless artistry, aloof composure, and an unsettling silence when it comes to her private self. But within that silence, there are whispers. In the Australian theatre scene, she was more than a star. She was a force. Some called it vision, others control. Behind closed doors at Sydney Theatre Company, rumors hinted at manipulation, artistic gatekeeping, and quiet power plays. Nothing was ever proven. Nothing was ever asked. There's also her relationship with fame itself. Blanchett treats celebrity like a costume she wears only when necessary, always calculated, always temporary. She speaks often of truth in art, but rarely of truth in life. Is that deliberate or defensive? Before the world crowned her its acting monarch, before Hollywood bowed to her icy precision, Cate Blanchett was already crafting a persona so impenetrable, it felt sacred. But what is she protecting? And why has no one ever truly tried to look behind the curtain? In this video, we open the doors long kept shut. We don't just celebrate Cate Blanchett's genius, we ask the questions no one has dared to voice. Questions that might not have answers, but deserve to be asked. Cate Blanchett wasn't just born into greatness. She constructed it, brick by meticulous brick, with the precision of a master architect and the cold resolve of someone who knew early on that the world wouldn't hand it to her. Born in 1969 in Melbourne, Australia, her childhood was marked by a quiet trauma, the sudden death of her father when she was just 10 years old. That loss, rarely spoken of in interviews, carved something deep into her persona, an early exposure to grief that seemed to echo in the emotional depth she would later bring to roles of women teetering on the edge. She entered the theater scene not as a starlet chasing fame, but as a serious artist with something to prove. After graduating from NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Sydney, she quickly became a dominant force in the Australian theater circuit. Her stage presence was electrifying, commanding, intellectual, and coolly intense. Even then, people noted the emotional distance she maintained, offstage and on. It was as though Cate Blanchett had decided from the very beginning she would show the world only what she wanted them to see, and nothing more. By the late 1990s, she became Australia's brightest export. Her breakout role as Queen Elizabeth I in Elizabeth, 1998, didn't just catapult her to international fame, it defined her archetype, the regal enigma, untouchable yet mesmerizing. Hollywood was ready to worship her, but Cate was never quite ready to surrender to Hollywood. Instead, she walked the razor's edge between mainstream and avant-garde. She appeared in big-budget hits like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, while also embracing strange, experimental films like I'm Not There or Manifesto. Her choices were brilliant, but often confounding. Why did she repeatedly avoid roles that would guarantee mass appeal in favor of cryptic, challenging characters? That pattern was no accident. Cate Blanchett has always shown an almost surgical precision in shaping her public image. She avoids social media entirely. She rarely gives interviews, and when she does, her answers are polished, intellectual, and fiercely guarded. Unlike other celebrities who open their lives to cameras, Blanchett's life remains walled off. Married since 1997 to playwright Andrew Upton, mother of 4, she projects stability. But the true nature of her marriage, her parenting, her personal beliefs, remain largely invisible to the public eye. This aura of controlled mystery only deepened when she became co-artistic director of the Sydney Theatre Company with her husband. During her tenure from 2008 to 2013, she transformed the company into a global artistic powerhouse. But it wasn't without cost. Behind the curtain, there were quiet mutterings, claims of authoritarian leadership, of artistic gatekeeping, of plays selected not for their merit, but for ideological alignment. These rumors, while unproven, still linger in Australia's theatre circles like unspoken truths. Even her activism carries a carefully calculated tone. Blanchett is vocal about climate change, gender equality, and refugee rights, but she never engages in political spectacle. She delivers her positions with the same icy eloquence that defines her performances. Admirers praise her discipline, critics question the authenticity. So who is Cate Blanchett? Truly, an artist of rare integrity, a control-obsessed perfectionist, a cultural monarch guarding a private kingdom, or all of the above? In the chapters ahead, we unravel the rise of this enigmatic figure, from a brilliant outsider in Australian theatre to one of the most formidable and unknowable icons in modern cinema. And along the way, we ask, what has she left unsaid, and why? Her rise was not explosive. It was methodical, deliberate, almost predatory in its precision. Cate Blanchett didn't burst onto the scene. She inhabited it slowly, like mist filling a room. Every role she took seemed curated not for popularity, but for power. And early on, it was clear. She wasn't chasing fame. She was crafting legacy. Her first film appearance in Paradise Road, 1997, was brief, yet striking. But it was Elizabeth that transformed her from a promising Australian talent into a global phenomenon. As the Virgin Queen, Blanchett displayed a mixture of icy resolve and deep vulnerability. The performance earned her a Golden Globe and her first Oscar nomination. More importantly, it defined her persona in the public eye. Regal, commanding, emotionally impenetrable. And yet, even at that moment of triumph, she recoiled from the Hollywood machine. Rather than capitalize on her newfound fame with blockbuster roles, she returned to Australia, to the theatre. Some saw this as a noble rejection of celebrity culture. Others whispered that she needed to maintain control, that she feared losing her identity in the chaos of American fame. She played Galadriel in The Lord of the Rings, an ethereal, almost inhuman figure of immense power. The casting was perfect, almost prophetic. On screen, she was luminous and remote. Off-screen, she remained a ghost in Hollywood circles, rarely seen, even more rarely heard. Then came The Aviator, 2004, where she played the one woman whose spirit could match Howard Hughes, Katharine Hepburn. For this, she won her first Academy Award. But again, she refused to follow the path others expected. Instead of launching into a string of Hollywood leads, she returned once more to the Sydney stage. She and her husband, Andrew Upton, were now co-directors of Sydney Theatre Company. To the public, it was a triumphant homecoming. Privately, it was the beginning of a shift, one that would bring both glory and controversy. Under her leadership, the company flourished artistically but attracted accusations of favoritism, of closed-door decision-making. Many younger artists felt shut out. The plays were critically acclaimed, yes, but there was a sense that only a certain kind of voice, a certain ideological flavor, was welcome. But no one dared challenge her directly. She was Cate Blanchett, untouchable, revered, worshipped in both the high towers of the art world and the mass-market cinemas. Her return to film in the late 2000s was marked by a series of bold, strange choices. I'm Not There, where she played Bob Dylan, Blue Jasmine, where she portrayed a woman unraveling from within, and for which she won her second Oscar. Blue Jasmine marked a turning point, not just in her career, but in how audiences saw her. The performance was raw, ugly, devastating. Suddenly, the emotional shield that had always surrounded her characters cracked. We saw the madness, the desperation, the fragile human underneath the perfect posture and controlled voice. But again, in press interviews, Blanchett refused to reveal anything about her own emotional process. The work speaks for itself, she often said. And then came the contradictions. She advocated fiercely for women in film, yet worked with Woody Allen. She supported gender equality, but declined to speak openly about pay disparities. Her critics began to ask, was her silence complicity, or was it part of the same cultivated distance she had always maintained? In 2015, she starred in Carol, a hauntingly restrained love story between two women in 1950s America. It was hailed as a triumph, both artistically and politically. Yet, during interviews, Blanchett's answers remained cryptic. When asked if she had ever had a same-sex relationship, she replied, yes, many times, then quickly added, in my imagination. The media buzzed, unsure whether she had revealed something or manipulated the narrative entirely. She never clarified. That's her pattern. Reveal just enough to provoke curiosity, then retreat. It's what kept her above scandal. But also, what kept her humanity at arm's length. Behind the golden awards and designer gowns, there was a growing question in artistic circles. Was Cate Blanchett too perfect? Too curated? Too calculated? Was the very precision that made her a genius also what made her unknowable? As her global fame peaked, so did the whispers. That her dominance in the Australian art scene had come at a cost to others. That she exercised silent influence over what stories were told and by whom. That behind her exquisite performances was a woman who refused to let anyone see the mess. But the world didn't look too closely, because the performances were always perfect, the image untouchable, the legend intact. For years, Cate Blanchett has existed above scrutiny, her artistry so towering, her image so polished, that few have dared to question the structure beneath it all. But if you listen closely, not to her words, but to the silences, you begin to hear the fractures. The career that seems spotless begins to reveal its contradictions. The control begins to look like fear. Whispers have followed Blanchett through the corridors of Australia's artistic institutions. When she served as co-artistic director of the Sydney Theatre Company, there were stories, not headlines, because no one dared, but murmurs of coldness, of a culture that discouraged dissent, of a boardroom where disagreement was unwelcome and where casting decisions seemed predetermined by personal loyalties and aesthetic elitism. Some former collaborators, speaking off the record, have described a system where Blanchett's vision overrode all others. She wasn't unkind, one anonymous actor stated in an unpublished interview, but she made it clear this was her space. You were either with it or irrelevant. While the media painted her leadership as visionary, backstage many began to feel the oxygen thin. It wasn't just her theater reign. Even in film, Blanchett cultivated an environment of near-total narrative control. She didn't just act, she executive produced, she developed scripts, she influenced casting. Her career was not shaped by the studios, it was shaped by Cate Blanchett herself. In 2017, she became a prominent voice in the Me Too movement, condemning abuse and advocating for industry change. But almost immediately, questions surfaced. Blanchett had worked with Woody Allen on Blue Jasmine, just years after Dylan Farrow's allegations had already entered public discourse. When pressed on this in later interviews, she said only, "I'm not going to comment on other people's decisions." It was a non-answer, a careful dodge, but it was enough to silence further inquiry. Some called it hypocrisy, others called it pragmatism. But one thing became clear, Cate Blanchett would never let the media write her narrative. She would decide which truths to share, which to bury. And yet, cracks began to show. During the promotional tour for Tar 2022, where she played a fictional female conductor facing allegations of abuse and manipulation, Blanchett gave a series of interviews that were uncharacteristically reflective. She spoke about the loneliness of power, about the hunger for control, about the cost of genius. Some interpreted this as mere performance, another role. Others saw it as a mirror held up to herself. "I don't believe in cancel culture," she said in one interview, "but I believe in consequences." The ambiguity of that statement, its deliberate vagueness, echoed through film circles. Was she defending the character in Tar? Was she drawing lines between herself and others? Or was she for the first time admitting that she knew what people had been whispering? She never clarified. Privately, friends describe her as warm, generous, deeply loyal, but only to a trusted inner circle. To the outside world, she remains an enigma, rarely photographed in casual moments, rarely seen without a mask, be it metaphorical or literal. Even as she champions refugee rights and ecological causes, she avoids being drawn into personal confessions. She leads initiatives, not conversations. But there are moments, flickers, where you see something else. During her acceptance speech for Blue Jasmine, her voice cracked. She thanked women who felt like they've been on the sidelines, watching stories they haven't been a part of. It was the closest she came to admitting vulnerability. And then, like always, the mask was back on. There is a cost to perfection. Blanchett has never stumbled, never scandalized, never confessed. And maybe that's the tragedy. We admire her so much, we've never demanded to know her. we've accepted the legend at face value. But behind the roles, the accolades, the carefully articulated interviews, is a woman who has buried more than we've ever seen. Not sins, perhaps, but truths. The ones that never make it to stage or screen. And in that silence lies the real story. At Aussie Uncovered, we believe Cate Blanchett represents one of the most complex and captivating enigmas in modern cultural history, not just in Australia, but across the global stage. She is not merely a great actress, she is a construct, a performance in and of herself. And in that construct lies both brilliance and unease. We admire her craft. That is undeniable. Blanchett is one of the rare figures who seems incapable of delivering a false note. From the terrifying restraint of Tar to the unraveling fragility in Blue Jasmine, she has shown emotional dimensions that stretch beyond the boundaries of conventional acting. In every frame, there is intention. In every silence, calculation. She is the kind of performer who doesn't play characters. She becomes them. But with that level of artistry comes a certain opacity, the kind that doesn't just shield her from scandal, but also from accountability. The carefully curated image, the unwavering control, the refusal to engage in messy public discourse, all of it has served to elevate her, but also to distance her from the very culture she influences. This isn't to say we expect her to bleed for the camera off screen. Privacy is a right. But the pattern, the silence around controversial collaborations, the avoidance of difficult questions, the unwavering grip on narrative control, suggests not just privacy, but power. And power, especially when unexamined, becomes part of the story. There's also the Australian context to consider. In a country known for its bluntness, its egalitarian spirit, Blanchett has always felt apart, more European in demeanor, more high art than pop culture. Some celebrate that. Others have quietly resented it. Her reign over the Sydney Theatre Company, though largely successful, left lingering tensions in its wake. Those who didn't fit the mold of her vision often felt excluded, unheard. Still, we can't ignore the pressure she must have carried. As the most internationally recognized Australian actress of her generation, Blanchett became a symbol of national pride, of female artistry, of cultural sophistication. Perhaps the coldness we perceive is simply self-preservation. Perhaps the silence is the price of excellence in a world that devours vulnerability. But even so, we wonder, what stories has she refused to tell? What truths lie behind that gaze, sharpened by decades of performing not just for audiences, but for the press, the industry, and history itself? We don't ask these questions to diminish her. We ask them because legends are not just built on achievements, but on the mysteries that surround them. And Cate Blanchett, in all her brilliance, remains one of the greatest mysteries Australia has ever produced. What do you think? Is the brilliance of Cate Blanchett enhanced by her control? Or does her silence hide more than it reveals? Is she the ultimate artist or the ultimate architect of her own myth? Some stories are never told. Not because they lack substance, but because the people at their center will never allow them to be spoken aloud. Cate Blanchett is one of those stories, shining, pristine, seemingly whole, and yet, somehow, forever out of reach. We remember her not for tabloid chaos or personal revelations, but for performances that feel like haunted echoes of something deeper. A woman unraveling in Chanel couture. A queen alone in a war room. A maestro consumed by her own power. The characters shift, but the undercurrent is the same. Control slipping through trembling fingers. Perhaps that's the real Blanchett. The one we've only glimpsed between breaths, in the moments just before the camera cuts away. The truth may never be printed in interviews or dissected on talk shows. It lingers in pauses, in the coolness of her smile, in the guarded way she navigates a world that worships vulnerability, yet punishes it with equal cruelty. In the end, Cate Blanchett remains a paradox, a national treasure cloaked in global detachment, a woman who gave us everything, except herself. And maybe that's what makes her unforgettable, because legends don't have to be known. They just have to be felt. She has never asked us to understand her, only to watch. And we have, for decades, in awe, in confusion, in admiration. And still, we wonder, behind the genius, what was sacrificed? What was hidden? And what questions have we never had the courage to ask? Now, you know, Aussie Uncovered.